There are wounds that don't come from knives or blades, but from silence, from words that were never spoken. And there are people who seem to leave your life so gently, yet inside you, they leave behind a battlefield. Have you ever felt that way? You forgave, but still couldn't find peace. You stayed silent, but still felt suffocated inside. You walked away strong, but still weren't truly free from the past. They hurt you and never apologized. They left and lived, as if nothing had ever happened. And you remained with thousands of unanswered questions. But do you know something? 1. Acceptance is the foundation of inner freedom. Have you ever felt that all you needed was an explanation, a sincere apology, or at least just for them to understand how deeply you were hurt? I've sat with many people, men and women in their late 30s, 40s, even 60s, though they've lived half a lifetime, with steady jobs and families of their own. Still, some old wounds remain unhealed, and what haunts them most is not what happened, but the fact that it was never explained, never fixed. I remember a man named Daniel, 52 years old, who came to see me during a therapy session. He told me, "I don't understand how that person could just walk away like that, after everything. I don't want them back. I just want to know why." I looked at him gently and asked, "What would change in you if you knew the reason?" He fell silent for a long time. Then tears came. You see, we often think an explanation will ease the pain, but the truth is, sometimes it never comes, and it never will. That doesn't mean you have to live in misery forever. As someone who has studied and lived by Stoic philosophy for over 30 years, I've learned this: acceptance, not resignations, the door to inner freedom. When you stop expecting others to repair the wrongs they've done, you begin to reclaim control over your emotions. They may never admit fault. They may keep living as if nothing ever happened. But you don't have to. You have a choice. Keep waiting for something that may never come, or free yourself from that waiting. I know it isn't easy. Forgiving, accepting, letting go sounds beautiful, but it hurts in practice. Still, let me tell you this from my heart. As a man who has carried his own regrets, you don't need an apology to find peace. You only need yourself. Maybe you once sacrificed, stayed silent out of love, endured so you wouldn't lose someone, and that silence was mistaken for weakness. But no, you're not weak. You just hadn't learned when to stop. You can't control how others treat you, but you can absolutely control how you treat yourself. And one day, when you no longer wait for anyone to close your wounds for you, you'll realize you never needed them to. You were strong enough to heal on your own. And then you'll discover something miraculous. No need to scream. No need to prove who's right. No need to fight. You just need silence and the courage to keep walking too. True revenge is not in action, but in growth. And do you know what happens once you learn to accept? You begin to see pain not as an enemy, but as a strict teacher, training you in a kind of strength no book could ever teach in us strength. I once met a woman named Karen, 47 years old. She was betrayed by her closest friend right at the darkest moment of her life, just after her mother passed away. She told me that, for months afterward, she couldn't sleep. Not because she missed that friend, but because she felt foolish for trusting. But one day, while sorting through her old home, she found a letter her mother had written before she passed. In it, there was one simple line: "You will grow the most after the things that hurt the most." She broke down in tears. And in those tears, she let go of her anger, not because her friend deserved forgiveness, but because she finally understood. It was that very betrayal that taught her the most important lesson she had to learn: how to love herself first. Have you ever gone through a pain like that? Someone shattered you, and yet, it was through that very crack that the light found its way in. Stoicism doesn't teach us to deny pain. It teaches us to face it, to understand it, and to walk through it with open eyes. Because if you learn nothing from your pain, you will repeat it. But if you do learn, then you will never be the same person again. We all carry wounds, but the question is, do you see them as proof that you are weak, or as evidence that you have lived, loved, and grown? Pain, if you give it a reason, becomes the greatest teacher you'll ever have. 3. Karma doesn't rush, but it's always precise. When you move through pain and begin to step into healing, something strange happens. You no longer want revenge. At first, you think, if only they knew how much I hurt, maybe they would regret it. If only I could make them feel the same pain I felt. I understand that feeling. I've seen hundreds of people carry an imaginary script of revenge, replaying in their minds, again and again, a confrontation that never happened. But do you know what really changes them? It's when they start living better, not to get even, but to heal. I remember one of my old patients, Mike, 59 years old, who lost everything after a family member stole the company he had spent 20 years building. He told me, I thought about suing, about making them lose everything. But then I asked myself, why would I want to become just another version of them? Instead of retaliating, Mike started a new company, smaller, yes, but he built it with a spirit of freedom, no fear of loss, no need to prove anything. The last time I saw him, he told me something I've carried with me ever since. They no longer control me, and that's my greatest victory. Do you see? Real revenge isn't about making them suffer. It's about no longer letting them control you, not your mind, not your emotions, not your actions. When you grow beyond them, when you live a life where they are no longer the center, they realize that they are the ones who lost something truly valuable. And the beautiful part is, you don't need to do anything at all. No harsh words, no public exposure, no battles on social media. You just grow. The more you grow, the further away from them you become. And one day, you'll look back and smile. Yes, that once hurt me. But I don't need revenge. I've already won through my peace and my progress. 4. Forgiveness does not mean inviting them back. And then, when you start to grow, when you are no longer driven by the need to strike back, something remarkable happens. You become silent, not because you have nothing to say, not because you forgot, but because you no longer need to say anything. I often tell my older patients, silence is not surrendered, as mastery. I remember a woman named Julia, 41 years old, who was betrayed by her closest friend and slandered publicly in her own community. Everyone told her she should speak out, fight back, prove what was true and what was false. But she chose another way. She remained silent, not because she was afraid, but because she knew the more she spoke, the more she would drag herself down to the same frequency as the one who had harmed her. Have you ever felt that way? When you reacted, you ended up more exhausted, not relieved. When you explained yourself endlessly, only to realize they still didn't understand, or didn't want to understand. Stoicism teaches us this. Silence is not the absence of strength. Silence is the control of strength. When you are calm enough not to react, you've already won. You don't need to make noise for others to know you're right. You only need to live rightly and let time tell the rest of the story. I've seen many people retreat into silence and then, years later, live a life that is whole, peaceful, and full of purpose. Meanwhile, those who attacked them, slandered them, remained trapped in chaos, in fear of exposure, in insecurity of their own making. That is the difference between a person who reacts from emotion and a person who responds with self-mastery. And do you know what's most remarkable? It's your silence that echoes the loudest in the other person's mind, because they expect you to react. They crave your response even if it's anger, but you don't give it to them. You give them space, and in that space, they hear the echo of their own wrongdoings. That is a judgment without any declaration. Point 5. Silence is not weakness, it is strength. After you've stayed silent long enough, after you've weathered the storm of emotions they left inside you, there will come a crucial moment when you face a difficult decision to forgive or not. And I want to say this clearly, from my heart, as someone who has been through it. Forgiveness is not a ticket for someone to return. So many people misunderstand. They think if they forgive, they must give that person another chance. They fear that forgiveness means losing their self-respect. But no, not at all. You can forgive and still keep the door closed. You can say in your heart, I no longer hate you, but I also no longer have space for you in my life. And that is not cruelty. That is maturity. That is self-love. I once spoke with a woman named Lisa, 45 years old, who had been betrayed by her ex-husband many times. Even after the divorce, she carried deep wounds. One day, she decided to write him a letter not to send, but to release. In it, she wrote, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I don't want to carry your shadow with me through the best years I have left. I forgive so that I may be free. Do you feel that truth in your heart? That moment when you let go, not to let them back in, but to walk forward lighter. Stoicism calls this the detachment of emotions from what we cannot control. You cannot control their remorse. You cannot change the past, but you can choose not to let them ruin your present. One more time. 6. You are not a victim, you are a survivor, and you grow. And when you have forgiven, when you have let go, when you know that door will never open again, you suddenly realize something very important. You are no longer a victim. You are a survivor, and more than that, you are someone who grows. I want you to reflect on this for a moment. There is a vast difference between merely surviving and growing. Surviving is simply still breathing, but growing means choosing to move forward, consciously, not carrying pain as a medal, but as a map. A map that leads you to a place where pain no longer defines you. I once worked with a man named Paul, 60 years old, who had been abused by his father throughout his childhood. He carried that anger with him for 40 years until his heart began to fail. Sitting in the therapy room, he said, I don't want to die still being that frightened 80-year-old boy. I want to live the rest of my life as a man who has overcome it, not as someone still controlled by it. And do you know what? That very awareness, that decision, was the beginning of a new life. You are no longer someone waiting to be rescued. You are the one rescuing yourself. No one else is leading you out of the darkness anymore. It is you with every mindful step, doing it each day. That is strength. That is what Stoicism calls self-mastery is the root of freedom. I know, maybe you still have scars. Maybe there are still nights when you wake up asking yourself, why did I have to go through that? But try asking instead, why? After everything, am I still standing? What within me has always been strong enough to never let me fall completely? 7. Stoic philosophy is the compass that guides. When you are brave enough to no longer live as a victim, when you are mature enough to no longer need revenge, then the next question becomes, what will I rely on to live the rest of my life? I can say this, after 30 years of studying and practicing Stoicism. Stoicism is not a dry theory. It is a compass that helps you navigate when the world around you is chaotic. A compass that helps you steady your heart when everything else is changing. I remember a man named Ben, 54 years old, who lost his job after 28 years in the same company. He told me, "I don't know who I am anymore. I used to think my job was my identity, but without it, I feel lost." I handed him a passage from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Ben was silent for a long time, and then he said, "I didn't lose everything. I only lost what was external. I still have myself. I still have the power to choose how to live." Stoicism teaches us this. We cannot control what happens, but we can control how we respond. We cannot stop others from leaving, betraying, or deceiving, but we can choose not to let them ruin our soul. That is the highest form of power, not the power of brute strength, but the power of self-mastery. You don't need to run and search for a place of refuge. You are your own refuge. You don't need anyone else to hand you certainty. You are the one who builds it choice by choice, day by day. Stoicism does not demand that you become cold. It teaches you to stay warm enough to love, yet rational enough not to lose yourself. When everything falls apart, you may lose many things: money, a job, a relationship, even a loved one. But if you can keep your mind steady, you will never truly lose everything. Because where calmness exists, hope remains. Where awareness exists, freedom remains. And where reason exists, there you can begin again stronger than before. Point 8. Every pain is a strict teacher, and you know something. Once you hold a steady compass to guide your life, you begin to look back at what brought you here. You look back at the wounds, the failures you thought you could never recover from, and you begin to see clearly. It was precisely those moments that became the greatest teachers of your life. I often tell my patients, life does not send us gentle teachers. It sends us pain, loss, betrayal, and forces us to learn how to stand again on our trembling legs. But do you know what the miracle is? You did stand. You are still here, listening to me now. And that means you have already overcome more than you realize. I remember counseling a woman named Angela, 50 years old. She had been a devoted wife, a model mother, until her husband left, taking everything with him: finances, reputation, even her trust. Angela thought she had lost it all. But in those months of washing dishes for a living, relearning how to exist alone, she began to realize, I never learned how to love myself because I always put others first. This fall finally forced me to learn that lesson. And now Angela runs a center that helps women become financially independent. She turned her wound into a flame. She turned her pain into action. She turned a collapse into an invitation to grow. Every pain is a teacher, but it is not a gentle one. It will push you to the ground, throw you out of your comfort zone, force you to learn how to love yourself, protect yourself, and never shrink again. Stoicism teaches us this. It is not what happens that matters, is who you become because of it. You can choose to resent what happened, or you can choose to be grateful because it taught you what no one else could. You can close your heart in fear of being hurt, or you can open it again with wisdom, with boundaries, with self-respect. You can collapse, or you can nod and say, I understand now. Thank you for the lesson. You've already come far enough that you are no longer a victim. Now it is time to step forward as a survivor, growing stronger every day. Forgive, stay silent, let go, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. And always remember, you don't need revenge, you only need growth. And when you master your own mind, no one, nothing can ever take away your inner freedom. Thank you for listening. Your new life begins right here, in this very moment.